Have to move for the next session. It's often said that art of communication in the language of leadership, and we are fortunate today to have the among us personality who are embodied with spirit. Now, ladies and gentlemen, we will indulge in fireside chat on maximizing efficiency through container terminals and multi-modal logistic. And for this, we have the moderator of this session, Mr. Jaffrey Thomas, partner PwC. I request you, sir, to please kindly come on the dais and take your position on the dais. Mr. Jaffrey, sir, a partner of PwC, brings his mechanical engineering background from IIT Delhi and an MBA from IIM Calcutta to his focus on railway and logistics. He leads a team optimizing in strategy, operations transformation with extensive experience. He directs projects like formulating market entry strategies in India, Bangladesh, and devising growth strategy for sector such as 3PL, container logistic, oil and gas logistic, and freight terminals. In his assessing investment opportunities across terminal and the temperature control logistic, private railway operations, and multimodal terminals. A very warm welcome to you, sir, on this lovely session. Thank you so much. Now I'm handovering the mic to you, and I request you to please give the invitation to the speakers of the session. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Without further delay, I'd like to invite the other panelists. Mr. Ashok Kumar Gupta, Chairman, IRC Group. Sir, request you to kindly join us on the dais. Mr. Ashok Gupta, Chairman and Managing Director, is a seasoned professional with over 40 years of diverse manufacturing experience across multiple industries. A graduate of St. Xavier's College, Calcutta, he has a strong passion for creating innovative logistics solutions. His innovative approaches have greatly benefited multinational companies, driving the creation of new and unconventional logistics solutions. We hope to benefit from his insight and experience today. Thank you for joining us, sir. I would also like to call upon our second panelist, Mr. Rudra Shriram, who's a director with DCM Containers. Mr. Shriram holds the position of chair for the PhD CCI Defense and HLS Committee. Additionally, he serves as the senior vice president of DCM Shriram Industries, a versatile company engaged in the manufacturing of sugar, chemicals, alcohol, industrial fibers, and engineering products headquartered in New Delhi. He oversees the company's engineering vertical, defense initiatives, and IT advancements. He achieved a Bachelor of Science degree in economics from Purdue University in 2013. His notable achievements have garnered recognition from the Purdue Alumni Association, bestowing upon him the Outstanding Young Alumni Award in 2015 and the esteemed Purdue Alumni Impact Award in 2019. Thank you, Rudra, for joining us for this conversation. Thank you, everyone. We hope to begin, and I must congratulate the previous panel before I start. It was really a very engaging conversation and did bring about quite a few interesting points. We hope to take that forward in this conversation. I'll start with Mr. Gupta. Mr. Gupta, over the last 3 decades, we've seen that on the international cargo side, we've seen significant adoption of multimodality, of containerization, right? For the first 2 decades, in fact, the increasing containerization was leading to an overall growth in container trade, much higher than economic growth, because more and more commodities were getting containerized. Do you still see there are pockets of opportunity on the international trade side where there are commodities or industries which are today not adopting the container? And in your view, what is something that could be done to promote this adoption of containerization and multimodality on the international trade side?
Thank you. See, one product that comes to my mind immediately is steel coils. And steel coils are still not getting containerized, primarily because of its, the stuffing cost. When you put the steel coils inside a container, you need to do lashing and choking. So there's a lot of manual work involved. There's a lot of this woodwork which is required, etc. And in India, we are importing a lot of steel coils from Japan and Korea. So the manual labor in these countries are very expensive. I mean, even this wood thing and all that, because it requires fumigation, all those certifications are required. So one product that comes to my mind is steel coils. Now, we need to do something. A lot of research has been done. People have, companies have developed thermocol. Thermocol with the cutout for a steel coil. So you just put in the thermocol, put the coil. Now, secondly, we do not even have the equipment at the ports or the ICDs to handle heavy coils. I mean, up to 3-4 tons is okay. But we don't have, like in Japan, a bigger forklift which can handle up to 14-15 tons of individual steel coil with a boom. It is not available in India. Yeah, at any of the ports, it's not available. The equipment required, like the boom, the accessories, they are also not available. So I think, and steel, we are importing very large quantity into India, steel coils. So I think.
Thank you, Mr. Gupta. Just on the same note, would an adoption of this from the exporting country side help drive this, or are there challenges to that as well? Because this is international trade, you would need the same standard to be adopted both sides. We see this in India with regard to, for example, granite and some of those larger granite blocks, etc., that ecosystem developed over a period of time to make it containerized, etc. Can something of that be looked at similarly for steel coils, or is this more trickier?
You see, they are basically resorting to a simpler mode, which is break bulk. So they don't want to get into the, reinventing the wheel again.
Right. Thank you.
So I'll just add a point while we're still on the subject of steel coils and the transportation of steel coils. So on the Indian, let's say once the steel coils are in the country, actually we have developed coil containers. So we actually facilitate the containers. We design the containers in a way where we can actually load coils into containers. The floor of the containers actually have it's a double level floor, and there's actually a ridge in the floor to accommodate the shape of the coil. So you don't have to do any of that woodwork. There's no wood involved actually at all. And see, it's like invention where there's a necessity, invention will follow. And we've been working with a couple of the larger CTOs in India, where we've actually developed coil containers with capabilities of loading the coils from the top, so open top containers, where you can actually load the coils, and we can load up to, if I'm correct, almost 53 tons into a single 40-foot coil container. And it still takes care of all the RDSO guidelines for container movement on rail. So, can it reach a global level of usage? I think so it can, because, we put these containers through the similar ISO 14996 tests to get them certified and get their CSC certification done. So so while yes, I agree with you, on a international level, it's still easier to pack it with wood and move it because, standardized, the box is still standard. But within India, the coil containers are definitely what are now being used by many of the largest CTOs, and we actually designed, developed, and manufactured those.
I was actually talking in context of international cargo.
Right.
See, in international cargo, you need to have inventories with the shipping lines.
Absolutely.
There are multiple shipping lines. You need to, and there are multiple ports from which the containers would be required. Say, if you take Japan, for example, I talk about Japan again and again because we are doing a lot of business from Japan. So, you need inventory at Nagoya, you need at Yokohama, you need at, multiple Kobe, etc., you know. So that getting the availability of this inventory at multiple ports, not only in Japan, but also in other countries, you know, from wherever we are importing, that would be a challenge, and that too with multiple shipping lines.
Right. And it's very interesting what both of you bring to the table in that sense, is that very clearly what this brief discussion did bring about was an area where innovation on the domestic side was easier to do, and hence and the adoption of the container works, while on the international side it's a lot more difficult penetration.
Right. And you actually just need someone to take a risk and try these solutions. And if like you take an example of the grain container, what we call the hopper container today, what is coming into somewhat of a fashion, not that much in India, but more in the European markets. Someone has decided to take a leap of faith, and that's happening today also.
I'll put it maybe a little differently also.
Right,
As a
right.
question for you, Rudra, there is that on the international chain or international value chain, the adoption of a new equipment for any particular movement involves a lot of different stakeholders. It's a much more diverse thing to be done. On the domestic, based on this example itself, you would say that it's been relatively easier. However, what we do see also from an India context is that it's largely container adoption on the international trade. On the domestic trade, our adoption of containers has been limited to maybe a white cement, sponge iron, tiles at best, but not really the entire 4 billion ton market that we in India are, or at least say a 3 billion ton of that, which is containerizable kind of cargo. We haven't seen adoption of containers. What's holding it back?
Oh man, I think I'll need a whole session on what's holding it back, or a full week I can go on about what's holding it back. Problem is that I don't mince my words on what's holding it back. We just had a full session, the session before, and if you picked up what the panelists were all talking about was standardization. Now there's a global level of standardization, then there's the Desi standardization. And the 32-foot trailer, the 32-foot truck, I'm going to say it again, it comes literally into that, ballpark of Desi standardization. Can you imagine you're sitting somewhere in Finland and you're like, procuring some hardware equipment from a factory in Aligarh. Aligarh is a global hub for hardware, bathroom fittings, whatever it is. And, you've outsourced this fabrication or manufacturing this company. And then, okay, so it's all made, you've got the quality done, all that's good. And then suddenly your CHA calls you you've got an end-to-end guy, pick it up, DAP from, Aligarh to the ports in Finland. And suddenly your logistics team comes running to you. They're like, sir, they have a 32-foot container. We have a 20-foot container lying at the port. How do we take care of this? So the Indian guy is going to be like, oh, don't worry, we'll stuff the 32 material into the 22-foot, into the TEU lying at the port for you. It's all okay. Now imagine that European, mindset of what? Where are the Euro pallets? What is going on? So, keeping the humor out of it, even in containerization in India, you would be shocked at what type of containers we're manufacturing. We have made solutions of 16-foot containers, 42-foot containers, 40-foot containers with hard open tops. Yes, it's moving towards and working with the RDSO standard, and it's happening. But I think till we go into Gati Shakti for a second over here, and we talk about moving 50% of our cargo movement from road to rail. That's the aim, right? By 2030, that's the set target, and I think it's getting harder. I don't know if infrastructure is growing, but I think it's still not moving at the pace to reach that 50%. Okay, let it reach 40%. For every 2% movement from road to rail, you require 17,000 TEU, domesticated TEU. But then again, it comes to why are we not, moving towards that? Because, we don't have to. Because we have these 32-foot trucks. And till those continue, and till the adoption of, let's say, stringent terms on the road movement, that you have to have them in either a 20-foot or a 40-foot container that is taking care of a certain standard, even at a global level, you will have a problem. So it's you've got to instill that discipline for that movement to happen, and it's happening over time. Even OEMs are getting particular that if my material is moving in India, it must move in a 20-foot container. Because there's some guy sitting in a global OEM's group office somewhere in Europe or Japan saying, boss, we can't plan like this. Or, someone had mentioned about how they had some automotive OEs had particular softwares to deal with just this indigenous movement. On a global level, that causes some sort of inefficiencies.
Right. Thank you. Thank you for that, Rudra. And again, on the same note, Mr. Gupta, one way of looking at this is that standardization is required, and either you bring in regulation or global customers who try and bring in that discipline. But the fact also remains that as long as it's a cheaper solution, it is keeping the logistics cost low. So why force regulation to standardize things? So really coming back to that 32-foot closed body truck, essentially. A bit of insights if you could share about the efficiency that it brings about, and why is it dominating the market? How did it come about, and what makes it dominate the Indian market?
It's a very interesting story, actually. It all started way back in 70s when Philips used to make tube lights. And one of our transporters who was associated with Philips, they came up with a brilliant idea of using a bus chassis to be converted into a truck. Because the tube light load was only weighing a total of 2 tons, less than 2 tons. So they did not need a truck, which had in those days had a capacity of 9 tons. 9 tonners used to be there. And a bus chassis would actually fit the bill, ideally, and a longer chassis, more cargo, lesser cost.
Right.
So that's what I was just talking to one of our the panelists in the previous session, that we should have explained, why 32 feet, why not 30, why not 35? So this is how that bus chassis used to be 32. Actually 28 those days. Yeah, that 28 was the original. They used to extend it by 4 feet so that the tube lights, one more set of tube lights could fit in.
Okay.
So that's how it all started. You see, the evolution of containers, this is, it all began when there were no containers. Entire cargo used to move in breakable condition.
Right.
So that is how the concept of containers came in, that you do the stuffing in the factory and you move it on a truck or a trailer to the port. On the port, you just offload the container, put it on the vessel. So there's no loading, unloading, stuffing, destuffing, no damage, no shortage, no such issues. Break bulk always, these are permanent issues in break bulk cargo. So with the times, what happened was this bus chassis got converted into, the manufacturers thought it's a good opportunity.
Right.
So they converted into a truck. And
the rest is history, as they say. Very, very interesting. Very interesting. Just another point, Mr. Gupta, related to the same or a related thing. One of the themes that we need to discuss as part of this chat is also around multimodality, and multimodal logistic parks is one area. We heard about that briefly on the previous panel as well, that there's about 30 plus MMLPs being planned by NHLML, which is one of the agencies which has moved most ahead on this journey so far. There are about 4 of them which have already been awarded last year. There are a couple of more in the bid stage now, and there's a big pipeline of MMLPs coming. In your view, what will be critical for making MMLPs a success in India?
see, for that, we need to understand what is multimodal.
Yeah.
Multimodal is basically we have 4 modes of transport. The cheapest is water, the second cheapest is rail, and then we have road. The fourth is by air, which is only for very expensive and very, very urgent cargoes. So let's leave aside the air. A good combination of road, rail, and water is what will make it viable. So one is the MMLP should have all these 3 connectivities. It must have the railhead. It must be connected with a canal or a river or some such thing. Right. And then, of course, ocean is not a problem. So to make it a success, the connectivity is number 1, which is a must, that all 3 modes should be connected very well. Now, if we, then we break it into 2 different things. One is domestic cargo and the other is international. So in international, we all know it's not a challenge. Yeah. I mean, we have ICDs, etc., and all the cargo is moving by rail and then onto the vessel, so that's not an issue. Domestic, it's a very big challenge. The government of India is doing a lot of work to develop this. But the problem in most of the sectors is the dredging. So the draft is not there. And that is the reason why even Varanasi to Calcutta has also not been a success, really. So there's a lot of infrastructure investment required. And the entire investment cannot come from the government. A lot of private investment would also be required. So these kind of infrastructure related problems are there. I mean, when we talk about, say, DFCs, you see, it's entirely controlled by the government. Right. So it's not an issue. But this is a different ballgame, waterways. It's a totally different ballgame. And I mean, no point in connecting rail, and a lot of people are doing a combination of rail and road. Yeah. But that is, the challenge there is the first mile and the last mile. So the cost of first mile and last mile makes it unviable. So it's not really a success. So railways is more successful in case of break bulk. Cement, steel, you know, things of that nature.
Or bulk like iron ore, coal.
Yes,
maybe,
whatever.
Yeah.
Yes.
Right.
And that also, one other point that was mentioned in the previous panel is about the same location or the same, let's say, park, having this a bonded and non-bonded area in the same park. And that is, I don't think we've reached that point where, you know, but because that plays in the concept of last mile. Yeah. Now you bring in the material to an unbonded area, which you're setting it up for an export. Then you have to again organize that last mile transport to a bonded area, which that cost itself can, you know, make or break the complete deal over there.
Agree, completely agree. And we have seen the MMLPs, I believe, will definitely pave the way for this. Private ICDs which got converted into Gati Shakti terminals or private freight terminals have that flexibility, and some of them have their rail line essentially outside of the bonded area, and they've got storage also outside the bonded area, so that the distance or the shift from bonded to ex-bonded becomes a lot more seamless. But obviously there's some distance to go on that as well. We've heard this quite often in terms of infrastructure not being there. I believe with the kind of investments that have happened both on road and rail, at least over the last 3 years, more than 1.5 crore each that has happened. It's really these windows onto that network, which is the terminals, that need to come up, and possibly that will happen. A question to both of you. Do you really think that once the infra is up, even from a services side or a process side, are we and our logistics service providers in our economy equipped to ensure that multimodality happens? Because so far, for the last many years, our thought process around that, around LPI, around a lot of these things has always been ki infra nahi hai. Right? Infra has always been absent. Now, assuming if infra comes through, and part of it has, do we really see process side, people side, or service provider side? Are we matured enough to adopt modality, or we'll reach another problem at that point of time?
Tell me, where do you consider India in comparison to Bangladesh or Thailand in terms of economy? Definitely better.
Better, any day better. Yeah.
Look at waterways in Thailand and in Bangladesh. So I have no doubts that eventually this will come in, because see, there are two things. One is the cost benefit, and the other is the reduction of the carbon footprint, which is now, something which is everybody is talking about and has become very important and compulsory, necessary. So it has to come in my opinion. It's only that we have started working on waterways very recently.
And can I just add on to that point? So you talk about the people and the teams. I think our logistics companies in India are astute enough to handle the infrastructure coming into a very large extent. See, I believe in a very simple concept, that's people before the plan. So, which is very unconventional to what normally happens in India. Normally it's like, acha investment kar lo, team to ban jayegi. But I feel a lot of technology going in to into the logistics space, making it easier for service providers to, let's say, gear up for the available infrastructure and the growth in the infrastructure. But what I agree with Sir, Ashok sir, is that the infrastructure is still lagging. So, there is a little bit of a cushion for logistics companies to get, by the time the infrastructure catches up, we'll be ready. And there are a number of companies who, let's take an example of a non-Indian company, but also very prevalent in the Indian logistics space, is DP World. And DP World is coming in, guns blazing into the country and is revolutionizing a lot of, and obviously creating a lot of competition to the traditional players.
Correct. And I think that's a very fair point that you make, that a lot of global international experts are also now going beyond the port, reaching to the last mile customer, right, and hence expanding their chains, which is changing the ecosystem as well. Right. Rudra, coming to a point which I think is of a lot of interest to you, in terms of the whole multimodality, the availability and the cost of the container per se, the equipment, the container becomes very important, right? Where do we stand globally in this regard in terms of containers? I know in terms of adaptability, or what you can otherwise call jugaad, right? We're great in terms of customizing the standard container to allow for different kinds of movements to happen on container. That's something we've been doing in India. But just the standard box, from a manufacturing perspective and from a cost perspective, how are we placed in India, and what can be done to improve our position?
So, Jaffrey, we've been working on this. We've been manufacturing containers in India for almost actually 30 years now. It is not been the most successful venture coming out of the DCM stable. And there are multiple reasons for this. One is obviously, you are competing with a, let's say, country that manufactures 95% of the boxes globally.
Correct.
So
yeah.
there is one of the main points would be scale, economies of scale. I mean, we today are proudly the largest box manufacturer in India, and we are a 10th of the capacity of a single plant in China. And these are real numbers. I mean, this can be put out in anywhere, and that's where we are. And you have a few more companies like us, so let's say a little bit less than us in terms of capacity, who are there. But these are all, people who put in their own money into the infrastructure, into the land, with actually no subsidies, no support in terms of, let's say, okay, fine, we'll give you this land on a long-term lease, you guys put in the rest of the capex and, go ahead. So I would say scale is definitely one of the major reasons of a difference. The availability of the raw material, we talk about steel and in containers, particularly corrosion resistant steel, or what we know in the industry as Corten steel. Now we've been working with the government and with the BIS to develop our own corrosion resistant standard in India. And I'm a part of a committee a technical committee with BIS, where they're saying that, okay, fine, firstly, manufacturers can't have a 10 to 15 rupee difference on the cost of, let's say, standard normal carbon steel and Corten steel, while in our competitor's country, the difference is a rupee. So one is the, let's say, production of that raw material. Secondly is the ready availability of that raw material. Right now also, if I have to order the different, let's say, measurements of the different thicknesses of the steel that goes into the container, along with the cross members and the other sections, I'm ordering about 7 to 8 different types of steel in different forms. Now for each type almost, I have to have an MOQ of 300 tons because that's a single roll. Like a single, it's almost like the steel companies are doing you a favor by making that steel and then taking money from you for the steel. So yeah, I mean, very light-hearted. We work with the steel companies very closely and they support us, but they've also been pulled up saying, boss, you can't have a 15 rupee difference if you want to make this a commoditized item. So because of that, let's say 10 to 15 rupee difference, it's very simple that our competitor's production price is the cost of my raw material landed in my plant. Not even. Yeah. So, you're at about a 25 to 30% difference at the price of a standard box leaving my lot compared to our competitor's lot. Now, okay, fine, you play in the domestication fee, like you take an XM container, if you domesticate it, you have to pay like about 18 to 22%. Still there's a 10-15% difference, right? So let's say, I would say like scale, availability of raw material, pricing of the raw material, just support to, infrastructural support to manufacture the containers. If, let's say, even if 2 of these 3 things are covered, we are at least gearing up to manufacture those containers within India. People have been talking about India becoming a global container manufacturing hub, and I've said this on multiple platforms. Guys, before you run, you have to learn to crawl and walk, and then you think about running and flying. Right now, we're not even crawling. Frankly, we're not even crawling. I mean, if, let's say, Concor came out with an order today for 10,000 containers, which they had and they dropped. So that's also an issue, right? Because you're relying on some few companies for that mass volume orders. I don't think if all of the Indian companies put it together and like literally dedicated their lines to Concor, we would just be able to supply all 10,000.
Fair point.
Because the time to ramp up itself, the material procurement, the सब कुछ करके आप तो वैसे ही 3 महीने लगेंगे till you are, banging those containers out.
So
yeah.
Thanks for that, Rudra. And I think it emphasizes a very important point that if we are looking at this multimodality journey, while the whole infra is one key requirement, we also need to be able to look at this area wherein we need to at least have containers, which is the core equipment for multimodality, become easily available and at the right cost from India itself, so that we are able to leverage this opportunity.
I just want to add one point onto this. So, there was a point of a PLI scheme coming in for container manufacturing in India, but nobody knows where it is. I've been working with a few of the agencies that have been involved in putting together the data for the PLI scheme, but what we've heard last that it's not happening as of right now, and that's a big, let's say, a non-starter for many, let's say, companies to invest after a certain capacity into the game.
Yeah. Sure. I've just been informed that we are also running out of time, so I'll just keep this very brief, one question each, please. Mr. Gupta, in your view, to make multimodality a success in India, what will be the single most important intervention? One intervention, in your view.
For domestic,
For domestic,
I
for
guess.
domestic, yeah.
dredging. In one word, dredging. That's the biggest challenge. Our family acquired a terminal at Haldia,
Oh,
and we've not been able to operate it for the last 2 years just because there's no draft.
Yeah, yeah.
The route, most popular route from Varanasi to Calcutta, is not operating. I mean, it's very ineffective for very, very lightweight vessels. But otherwise, it's not successful, again, because of dredging.
So it's essentially a draft issue there. Or let me put it, reliable availability of draft all through the year.
Well, draft is an issue. So you call it reliable or you call it whatever. But
So
you see,
LAD is not there.
there are no dredging equipments available with the dredging corporation. I mean, very few in comparison to what numbers and what capacities are required.
I'll just maybe go a little deeper into this because I just don't want to leave the opportunity of getting your insight on this, because what we also read is that this has been the whole darling waterway for interventions. World Bank's invested a lot of money over the years here. There were assured depth contracts for dredging awarded at some point of time. I don't know whether they're still valid or not. But this has really seen a lot of focus over the years. Despite that, you say that the infrastructure itself is not there. Would that be right?
Absolutely. You see, besides dredging, we need terminals. We need terminals where you can offload the cargo, you can load the cargo, there has to be enough space, there has to be equipment, there has to be geared terminals, to be able to do the loading, unloading, etc. So all that, I'm sure, will take time, but will come eventually.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Gupta. One last question, Rudra, to you. Your view, same. One intervention you think to make multimodality a reality in India?
I would just pin this at last mile connectivity. While you can make the big fancy parks and make the big fancy roads and the big fancy service lanes, we faced that with the initial metro in India. Leave, let's say, cargo out of it, but we have that problem with the metro in Delhi today. The next phases of the metro, it's absolutely fine. You're literally outside residential areas. The same problem shouldn't come in with the DFCs coming in. The same problem shouldn't come in with the new ports coming in and the new infrastructure near the ports coming. That last mile connectivity is where A, the ambiguity stays, B, the inefficiency stays, and third, it's a huge cost center. Whether it's a cost center for a logistics company or a cost center for the end customer or the infrastructure provider, it's a huge cost center which is only seen बहुत बाद में. जब वो पूरा बिल निकल के आता है, वो 30% extra कहाँ से निकलता है?
Fair point. Thank you. Thank you, gentlemen, for your thoughts and insights. I think I'll just open it to the audience if there are any questions. Please.
This question is for Rudra, and since you mentioned, and in the past as well, when we've discussed a couple of times, you've made this mention that one, you're the largest in the country, yet you're not even 1/10 of a unit that's operating in China, for example, right? And you spoke about the PLI missing in this scheme of things, while it was earlier spoken about. And you've been working with agencies and government very closely. You're on a couple of committees. Why do you think is the government not willing to actually push this whole agenda of Indian domestic containers, made in India? We keep talking about Atmanirbhar Bharat, and why is this not taking off?
I think the government is wanting this to happen, but I think want and delivery is two different things, right? firstly, how do you bridge a 30% price gap? Simple. So our ask in the PLI scheme and the ask which was asked was very simple. That for a few years, one has to cover the viability gap. Otherwise, it's not possible for that scale. Let's see, even if I scale up to double, triple my capacity, there's still going to be a difference, guys, because that difference isn't just coming from the scale. The difference is coming from the raw material availability and the raw material price, which is 80% of my production cost. Right? It's simple. It's a steel box. I mean, I hate saying it. It's not that easy to make. We've actually tested for agencies and the containers have failed. So I know it's not that easy to make. But it is in a very, let's say layman terms, a steel box. So steel is my main raw material. So one is I think the scheme went into too many iterations. And what we had suggested is that, yeah, you come out with the scheme, and in 1 year you can, adjust the scheme, improve or cancel the scheme, whatever it is. But till you don't try, it's not going to reach anywhere. We know very clearly that even in China, a lot of the money being made on standard boxes is actually just the subsidy amount. Whatever it is. I don't know the numbers over there to get that much detail, but we know it happens sometimes. We know that they crash the prices sometimes as low as $1,600 to $1,700 dollars per TU, with the MOQ of, let's say, not even 500 or 1,000 containers, which, if we translate to like a tear weight of, let's say, 2 tons or so, that's less than $1 a kilo. They're government owned or not owned, there's somewhere some money is being made somewhere. So we asked the same thing. We said, listen, let's work together. The scale is going to take its, 9 months to a year or even 2 years to get there, and maybe it will never get there. Because we set up a 18,000 TU per annum plant in Chennai in the, I think, 10 years that it ran. And I was a kid when it was running. By the time I grew up, that plant was shut only. We never even reached 80% capacity any of the years that it ran. And this is the 90s I'm talking about. So today, now that I'm, standing and I can reach 10,000 TU, one is skeptical that do you want to burn your finger twice in the same job, right? So only with that confidence that, the government is behind us, not just in, the, let's say, word, but in the letter, you will see investment happen. Why will steel companies not open subsidiaries to manufacture containers? If they see that there is the support, the confidence comes in. Why would steel companies not tie up with companies like mine and say, boss, you are our container manufacturer. Let's invest together. But that's only when you see that support coming in. We see it in semiconductors today. We see it in the defense industry where I operate today, that PLI works. It brings in the confidence, and also PLI cleans up the job. People getting into a PLI are going through tremendous amount of audits. You can't have any, let's say, red flags being raised. So people are particular about corporate governance. It's an overall improving the business nature, whatever the sector is, whether it's electronics, whether it's defense, whether it's any of the other sectors where PLI is coming in.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. There's one more question there, please. Somebody.
Yeah, one small question I just wanted to ask with Mr. Ashok Gupta, actually, out of his experience, because in the last panel, actually, one of the key points which was missed out of the domestic cargo, which actually you brought in this panel. How important is the time to market and time to cost to market for the implementation of multimodal logistics park? And if it is important, is it being considered at all while developing or bringing up all these logistic parks?
You see, basically, multimodal logistics will consist of, why would somebody go for it? There are 2 aspects to it. One is the turnaround time, which is the delivery time or the transit time, and the other is the cost. And then, of course, the supplier or the manufacturer, he calculates if the time he is losing because of going multi-model, is that, what is his inventory carrying cost? And is it good enough, profitable for him to save that money and then spend that money in inventory? Higher inventories, of course, because then the floating inventories would be much higher if the transit time is higher. So these are the two aspects, and that would depend on what industry is being looked at. So if you're talking about, say, cement or paper or steel, I think it would make sense, definitely. And that is where the bulk is. And if you're looking at a consumer product, then I think time is of great essence and very, very important. So they can't afford to lose time, because a client who comes to the shop to buy a TV, if he doesn't find it today, he'll buy another one. He's not going to be waiting for your brand there. So I think, does it answer your question?
Right now, actually, we are talking about a lot of, most of the movements are happening by road. And since all these facilities and all this infrastructure and facilities are coming up, and definitely some part of or the major part of, or a major chunk of the cargo from road may get converted or maybe serviced through multimodal. So in that case, so it'll form part of all maybe consumer industries will also be part of it, or heavy industries already shifted. Most of it is shifting to the railways in case of the heavy industry, heavy metal, basically steel and all that. But in terms of like FMCG or FMCD or any other types of goods, because the multimodality basically is, there are two parts. One is the EXIM cargo, which actually is taken care of, most of it. But the domestic cargo, since the India is spread in a way that you cannot, it is very difficult to connect it to multi-modes basically. Like you cannot connect it with train as well as water at the same time.
So if I'm not wrong, our understanding of multimodal is combination of road and water. Am I right?
Or road and rail.
Or road and rail.
Or road and rail.
Yeah, because road and rail is easier in case of India, actually. And in terms of water, actually, you rightly mentioned there's a big challenge because of the dredging is one of the issues. You cannot actually apply bigger vessels or reasonably bigger vessels. Most of it is connected basically to road and rail.
So see, road and rail, like I explained earlier, the main challenge is the first mile and the last mile cost. That's the main bottleneck. So that makes it unviable for anybody to shift to that route. And if we are looking at road and water, then of course the transit time is a big challenge, for which, because of which the consumer goods industry will not be looking at this.
That was exactly my question.
See, if you look at Bangladesh or Thailand, examples which I gave, Bangladesh is importing millions of tons of goods cargo from India. And all is going by waterways, all on barges. But what is the product? Fly ash, steel, cement, things of that nature, sponge iron. So things of that nature.
So,
So in terms of FMCG, we talk about white goods or white appliances. What Ashok says is absolutely correct. If the consumer doesn't get the product, he or she, there is a chance may switch over to another product just to satiate the need or the requirement at that moment. But I think we have to have faith I think the way that the last mile is improving, there are micro warehouses coming up within the larger cosmopolitans, micros on the right, but mini to micro warehouses coming up within, and they are slowly getting connected to the larger warehouses on the fringes, and that hub and spoke model is more and more coming into play, which will take care, but it takes time. It'll take time, but time to market, I think, is very tough to gauge.
Yeah,
Also-
actually, my
yeah.
question was that all this infrastructure, is it supporting that kind of requirement?
So-
because on the other side, we are talking about DFRC, wherein the haulage by train has actually got reduced, like from Hazira to
Right.
Hazira to NCR. DP World is plying a train, it reaches sometimes in 24 hours,
You're
or
right.
maximum by 36 hours, which is
Right.
faster than road, I think.
Right. So I think the one point, and your point is absolutely fair, and maybe in some other panel during the day we get to spend a little more time around that. What you're saying is broadly right, that yes, these modes require to be more responsive. Also, by nature, containerization and multimodality works much better in more value-added industries. The conundrum that needs to be solved is that more value-added industry order will always be make to order rather than make to stock. But the success that we're seeing in multimodality or rail-based or based operations is more on the make to stock side. How we make successful in the make to order industry is I think another session and another conversation we should be able to. But thank you for your question, and
Thank
thank
you.
you everyone
Thank
for your
you.
time.
Thank
Thank you panelists for your time and insights.
Thank you so much, honorable dignitaries on the dais. I feel honored to head today and announce for felicitation of renowned hard-working dignitaries in our midst. For this, I would like to request Mr. Abhishek Rao, sir, President RSA Global, to please kindly felicitate the honorable dignitaries on the dais. As well, I request Mr. Naveen Seth, sir, also Deputy Secretary General, PhD Chamber of Commerce and Industry, to please kindly felicitate the honorable dignitaries on the dais. Moderator, Mr. Jaffrey Thomas, sir, partner PwC. Please give huge round of applause, ladies and gentlemen. Mr. Rudra, sir, Director DCM Containers. And Mr. Ashok Gupta, sir, Chairman IRC Group. Thank you so much, honorable dignitaries on the dais. I request the dignitaries to please come in front for the group photograph.